Hey guys, tonight we explore the shocking story of the Hunchback Queen, a monstrous body born from ruthless dynastic incest. When snow blankets the royal palace of Madrid, every curve on the princess's back resonates like the verdict of power's dark machinations. The court's splendor is merely a mask, concealing the darkest secrets of the Habsburg lineage. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Which city are you watching from? And what is the local time there right now? Share it with me now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cold February wind continued to lash the stone walls, rustling like a sleepy lullaby, pounding against Isabel's heart as she stepped through the council door. Inside, the flickering candlelight fell upon the long red carpet, marking the silent footsteps of courtiers kneeling in reverence. All was still, save for the soft clatter of the rigid back brace clamped tightly around her spine. Echoing sharply in the hushed chamber, Isabel felt her heartbeat slow, as if she were drifting into a drowsy dream amid the solemn assembly. Upon the throne, King Philip IV sat upright against the black marble seat, the aura of royal power enveloping the faces of every courtier. The dancing flame of each candle cast his countenance in alternating shadows, stern, yet betraying unspoken depths of emotion. Beside him, the Duke of Olivares gave a subtle nod, his eyes gleaming with quiet cunning. Isabel bowed, her slender shoulders trembling beneath the gold-embroidered brocade, and spoke in a calm voice. "Your Majesty, I await your command." Silence claimed the chamber once more. The wind outside the window seemed fainter now, replaced by the soft patter of snow on the roof. Then the king spoke, his tone a sorrowful lullaby in the night. "My daughter, in the next 3 months, your destiny will be shaped. All is done for the crown, for the grand future of the House of Habsburg." Isabel drew in a deep breath, her chest filling with icy air. "Your Majesty, please state your order plainly," she murmured. The king's gaze fell upon her, contemplative. "We have negotiated with Austria. You shall wed Archduke Leopold Charles, your cousin. The wedding will be held at the Madrid palace on the most splendid spring day. When the snow glows gold," a wave of astonishment rippled through the room. Isabel felt her heart catch, a sudden ache coursing down her back, causing her to utter a soft, dreamy moan. "Archduke Charles," she whispered as though half asleep. The courtiers offered polite applause, each clap sounding distant as though within a vast cavern. The king nodded. "Indeed, though we have no choice. He will understand your particular circumstance. He shares the blood of Habsburg as you do." Isabel blinked, envisioning her betrothed's face shimmering like a mirage in slumber. The last attendants departed, leaving only the candlelight dancing to Isabel's faint breathing. She stood before the throne and bowed once more deeply, fighting back tears at the corners of her eyes. "I vow to obey," she declared, her voice quivering as though brushing away the cold snow upon her shoulders. Her legs felt as though they might give way, yet the image of the throne and the call of duty compelled her to remain upright. When the chamber emptied, Isabel wandered to the mother-of-pearl family chronicle, her fingers tracing the sorrowful sheen of the pages. The Habsburg lineage unfurled before her like an endless tapestry woven from hope and suffering. She whispered to herself, "My life is like a page written in ink that cannot be erased, only stained with darker sorrow." The words drifted in her mind like a sleepy breeze through the corridor. On her way back to her chambers, Isabel paused at another window where snow fell softly upon the stone mosaic. She closed her eyes, inhaling the faint warmth carried by the gentle wind, tinged with melancholy. She murmured, "Father, oh Father, I only wish to live once for myself." Yet in her heart, she knew that plea was but a dream in the heart of a bitter winter night. Back in her room, She quietly removed the brace. Each joint of her spine, cracking like tightened strings in the stillness, Isabel sank onto the silk carpet, hugging her knees to her chest. Night descended, and the wind's soft lullaby filled the air like a tender melody. She still felt the constant ache, yet in that moment her heart felt a subtle relief. Donna Mercedes gently opened the door, carrying a steaming pot of jasmine tea. "Your Highness, you have returned." Her warm voice soothed the weary body. Isabel nodded sleepily, eyelids heavy. "Mercedes, I only need sleep." Mercedes smiled, setting the porcelain cup on a small white table and offering it to the princess. The rising steam mixed with the golden glow of the candle, weaving a fragile haze of tranquility. Isabel sipped the tea. Its gentle sweetness eased her breathing. She looked at Mercedes with a dreamy smile. "Thank you." Her eyes grew heavy, and in a murmured reverie she drifted. 3 months. 3 seasons. I must be strong. Then, under the flickering candlelight, the princess surrendered to drowsiness, falling into a gentle, lingering sleep, ready to awaken for another fate, written by power and royal duty. The massive oak door swung shut behind Isabel, leaving the council hall glowing with candlelight like a lonely arena. In the long corridor, only her soft footsteps and the faint clatter of her back brace echoed. The flickering candles danced across the stone statues, casting the slender but proud shape of Isabel as she moved slowly through the hush. A cold draught slipped in through a side window, scattering bits of snow across the marble floor, whispering at her ear and reminding her of the days ahead. Isabel paused at a section of wall carved with jagged Habsburg reliefs. She tilted her head upward to the worn Latin inscription above Virtus et Gloria in Aeternum. The words seemed to ring out courage and glory forever. Courage, glory. But to her they were distant concepts. Like a midday nap in the midst of exhaustion, she touched her left wrist, where the brace's scarred straps bore the memory of pain. Isabel sighed softly, the sound drifting away like a gentle breeze. She pressed on, feeling lost in the palace's labyrinthine depths. Each closed door held another story, lessons of history, political edicts, schemes for power, and the family's tragedies. She longed to flee, to vanish into the vast snowdrifts outside, where no one would see her curved spine, only sky and wind. Yet in her heart, she still heard her father's voice. "Your duty lies in the greatness of our future." Isabel approached her private oratory, a small chamber with a dark ebony altar, where she had once found solace on sleepless nights. The candlelight flickered over a Pieta statue, its form distorted as though in a dream. She knelt on a worn rug, bowing her head, shoulders trembling. "Lord, I have mercy," she whispered, drowsy but earnest. "I only pray for a miracle, so I need not become a pawn in these games of power." Her words drifted with the sound of snow tapping the window panes, composing a lullaby of weary resignation. When her prayer ended, Isabel rose and walked to her dressing table. Before the mirror, she removed the pearl-encrusted crown and laid it gently on a wooden tray. Her blue eyes shimmered with endless sorrow. She smoothed the edge of her brocade gown, imagining herself in a simple dress, no gold, no constraints. But such a gown existed only in dreams. Reality would never allow it. Mercedes entered quietly, carrying a steaming cup of hot chocolate. "Highness, do you require anything else?" Her voice soft as a spring breeze. Isabel managed a tired smile. "Just a bit of warmth." Mercedes placed the cup in her hand, and the rich aroma rose to envelop her. Isabel sipped, the sweetness easing the tightness around her chest. Seated in a plush armchair, bathed in candlelight, filtered through the drapes, Isabel spoke in a hushed tone. "Mercedes, do you believe my fiancé will treat me kindly?" Mercedes paused a moment, then replied gently, "Highness, it is said he is compassionate and learned." "You are not alone." Isabel nodded in her half-awake state. "I only hope so." Her eyelids fluttered shut as her heartbeat slowed. In that instant, Isabel reflected on the future 3 fleeting months to prepare for her wedding, then countless long nights of endurance. Yet in her dreamy thoughts, a faint spark stirred a longing to live for herself. Even if only in a dream. "I must find a way to survive," she murmured, unsure whether it was a vow or somnolent rambling. When the palace clock tolled 9 times, Mercedes gently pulled her sleeve, lit another candle, and whispered, "Highness, it is late." Isabel sighed. I will return to my chamber." She rose unsteadily and moved toward the window, where snow silently gathered on the sill. The outside lights were blurred, but to the princess, that snow was a vast blanket embracing her sorrow. Leaving the ornate room, Isabel walked slowly down the empty corridor. Each step was a lullaby, urging her to relinquish the burden she bore. The wind brushed past, carrying a hint of snow in her hair. Isabel closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, as though committing every silent moment to memory before the morrow ushered in a new fate, one commanded by power and royal duty. Back in her chamber, she sank into the velvet bed. The coverlet, warmer than any throne, in the final moments before sleep claimed her. Isabel felt her heartbeat steady like a gentle lullaby, guiding her into deep slumber, where dreams of sorrow and comfort intertwined. And in the darkness, the princess closed her eyes, surrendering to destiny, hoping that when she awoke, she might walk freely, if only within the realm of her own dreams. Now, as night has fully fallen and only the soft rustle of a light breeze stirs the window's gap, Isabel Maria Ueña turns inward, reviewing her life as though leafing through a fragile book. She is 17 years old, the only daughter of King Philip IV and Queen Isabella of Portugal, bearing in her veins the illustrious blood of the Habsburgs. Her paternal grandparents, Emperor Ferdinand I and Empress Anne of Portugal, initiated a series of dynastic, consanguineous marriages to secure the throne and consolidate power. Her maternal grandparents, King John III of Portugal and Empress Catherine, likewise played vital roles in the alliance between 2 realms, but their earnest efforts also sowed within Isabel the congenital spinal deformity that marked her from the cradle. Her childhood passed beneath the soft glow of oil lamps, poring over hefty tomes on Roman history, Greek mythology, and the governing secrets of great kings. She had one younger brother, Prince Carlos, who was cruelly claimed by incurable illness at the age of 8. Memories of him survive only in spring garden drawings, his clear laughter drifting through her window and the swift patter of his small feet chasing butterflies. When he died, Isabel had no chance to bid him farewell. That loss scarred her heart like a shard of glass that could never be mended. At 10 years old, she was betrothed to the Regent of Navarre, but that first love never came to pass. She recalls her father's gaze from the throne, his hand brushing through her hair as he whispered, "You shall be the hope of the crown." That hope settled on her shoulders like a yoke, a burden heavier than any treasure. From that moment, Isabel knew she was more than a mere girl. She was a living emblem of the court, a prize more precious than all jewels. In the winter of her 16th year, her spinal curvature worsened, making each step an ordeal. Royal physicians resorted to every remedy, Eastern elixirs, Western orthopedics, yet relief was always fleeting. Isabel learned to deflect pitying glances with a thin smile. Cocooned in a specially tailored, heavy velvet gown designed to conceal her deformity, 4 months ago, her father summoned her to the council and decreed her betrothal to Archduke Leopold Charles. The news struck like a storm in a still sky, obliterating her hopes to live for herself, to escape her role as a token of royal power. She stood before the throne and bowed to her orders. her heart burning with secret resentment. The pearl-encrusted crown on her brow felt like tears from a glorious yet sorrowful past. Now, seated in the quiet warmth of her private chamber, Isabel reflects on fragile bonds. Her mother, Queen Isabella, always gently counselled, "Hold fast to faith with your heart." But that heart has been weighed down by a twisted spine and dynastic duty, its beat slowed to a sleepy lullaby. She remembers strolling with her mother through snow-dusted gardens, tales of childhood in Lisbon, where white-sailed ships glided beneath the sun. She recalls her mother's eyes sparkling with belief in her daughter's future. She also recalls her maternal grandfather, King John, who gave her a small pearl ring as a protective charm. He said pearls come from the tears of the sea. A reminder that sorrow can become strength. She keeps that ring always, as her talisman amid the court's turbulence. Now, 3 months of wedding preparation have begun. Each passing day, another long night of pain and loneliness. She wonders whether the Archduke will truly understand her special circumstances, whether he will ever see the person beneath the sumptuous brocade. In her drowsy moments, she envisions his proud Habsburg features, painted in courtly portraits, an inviting warmth in his eyes. Yet distant. Yet amid all this anxiety, Isabel nurtures a tiny spark, the yearning to live for herself. Even if only as a lullaby in the night, she imagines that when the snow melts, she will not merely be Isabel Maria Oenia, Princess of Habsburg, but a woman who chooses her own path, no matter how rugged and uncertain. In her oratory, she kneels once more before the statue of the Virgin, murmuring, "O Lord, grant me strength to live, to love, and not to become a tragedy." Drowsiness seeps in. The wind outside her window lulls her toward gentle dreams. Isabel smiles sleepily, believing that even in a life of suffering, there remains a miracle for a heart that longs for freedom. And as she closes her eyes, her slumber enfolds all her memories from her Habsburg bloodline to her solitary dreams into a sweet lullaby for her weary soul. Returning to her private chambers, Isabel closed the heavy oak door and knelt before the ebony altar, the candlelight flickering like unending tears. "Why must this cruelty persist?" she whispered, a warm tear tracing a path down her porcelain cheek. In her mind's eye, she heard again the hushed voices of royal physicians warning of consanguinity's toll, protruding jaws, twisted spines, gaunt frames, and infants who never drew breath. The court's doctors spoke of her lineage more as a medical case than a noble house. A gentle rap at the door drew her back. Mercedes slipped inside, carrying word of tonight's sumptuous banquet where the imperial ambassador of Austria would preside. Isabel wiped her tears and forced a smile. She knew her duty awaited. "Duty does not wait," she murmured, while Mercedes arranged her gown of midnight blue, embroidered with gold. Isabel leaned close and asked softly, "What can you tell me of my betrothed?" Mercedes paused, then offered with quiet warmth, "My lady, he is well versed in the arts, fond of music, and bears the characteristic Habsburg jaw." Isabel gave a brittle laugh. At least he shared her inherited sorrow. Later, in the grand hall, the evening unfurled in opulence. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over polished marble floors and towering columns wrapped in velvet drapes. Minstrels tuned their instruments for the first strains of lymphatic melodies. Archduke Leopold Charles entered in full Austrian ceremonial attire, a tailored coat of deep forest green, adorned with silver braid, a star of his house pinned at his breast, and his prominent jaw set in gentle dignity. Candlelight danced across his features as he swept Isabel a courteous bow, his eyes reflecting genuine concern. Around them, nobles and courtiers applauded the power of the alliance, raising their goblets to toast prosperity and unshakable bonds between kingdoms. Yet in Isabel's chest, her heart felt like a stone sinking into deep water. The celebration was but a stage play, and they were its unwitting actors. She sat at the high table, her posture carefully held by the stiff corset that bit into her ribs. The Archduke took his seat beside her, the soft rustle of his robes mingling with the tinkling of silverware and hushed conversation. Laughter echoed off marble walls. Crystal clinked against gold-trimmed goblets, and the scent of roasted pheasant and spiced wine filled the air. Yet Isabel's ears heard only the steady thrum of her own pulse. She watched as her future husband greeted dignitaries in turn, offering polite smiles and nods. Not once did anyone mention the fate of their future children or the health they might inherit. Instead, all spoke of the strategic strength of their union, never the fragile lives it would affect. Between courses, a harpist plucked a lullaby so soft and slow it seemed meant to coax sleep from the weary. Isabel closed her eyes for just a moment, imagining herself adrift on a moonlit lake, the gentle waves rocking her into oblivion. She recalled the first time she heard her mother hum that very tune during a dark night of convalescence, how that melody once brought comfort. Here, it felt like a requiem for her lost independence. When the Archduke leaned close to offer her a glass of champagne, Isabel opened her eyes. His voice was low, tinted with a soft Viennese accent. "Princess, I trust you are well." The question startled her, for in that moment he saw beyond the gown and jewels to the woman beneath. She managed a quiet reply. I am as well as one can be." She touched the glass to her lips, the bubbles tickling her throat, offering a brief warmth that eased her aching spine. A toast was called for the new alliance. Archduke Charles raised his glass to his lips and spoke to Princess Isabel Maria Oenia. "May our union bring strength to our houses and hope to our heirs." The hall echoed with applause as horses of light pranced across windows revealing the silent snowfall outside. Isabel lifted her own goblet, her hand trembling, and echoed, "To our shared future." In the clamour, her whispered prayer rose. "Grant me the courage to endure." Dessert arrived, delicate pastries dusted with gold sugar, sweet custards perfumed with orange blossom. Isabel tasted a small bite, closing her eyes to savour the fleeting sweetness before the bitter aftertaste of duty returned. Beside her, the Archduke offered quiet commentary on his childhood studies in mathematics and his fondness for midnight serenades. His conversation was gentle, genuine, as if seeking a companion rather than commanding an alliance. Isabel listened, heart fluttering at the thought that perhaps, in this man, she might find an ally to share her burdens. Throughout the evening, the marvel of the palace seemed to warp into a dreamscape. Silken banners hung like drifts of snow. Marble columns rose like ancient trees in a forest of light, and faces blurred behind masks of etiquette. The Archduke's hand brushed hers momentarily as they stood to watch a troupe of dancers glide across mosaic floors. The contact was brief, but sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with cold. Late into the night, the grand hall emptied, leaving only the fading notes of the harp. Isabel and Mercedes retreated down the torchlit corridor, the echoes of laughter long gone. Mercedes reached for her lady's elbow. "Highness, may I assist you further?" she asked. Isabel shook her head, weary as a dreamer waking at dawn. "No, thank you. Mercedes, my bed awaits." Her voice was soft, heavy with sleep. Alone again in her private suite, Isabel stood before her dressing table, the last remnants of candlelight flickering against the mirror. She removed her gown and corset with tender care, each clasp and ribbon a reminder of the day's trials. Slippers slid onto her feet, soft and warm. She eased into her nightrobe of pale silk, but its weight, a comfort after hours in stiff finery. She paused at the window, gazing out at the drifting snowflakes that blanketed the courtyard. In that hush, she murmured to herself, tomorrow I will rise and face another day." Her eyelids fluttered as she spoke. Her final vow of the night, "I will find my own path, even if it means forging it alone." As she slipped beneath the down-filled coverlet, the plush sheets enveloping her in warmth, Isabel closed her eyes to a final lullaby, a distant memory of her mother's gentle hymn and the Archduke's kindly concern. In the quiet dark, her heart slowed into the soft rhythm of sleep, ready to dream once more of freedom and hope, even as her waking hours remained bound by crown and duty. After the banquet, as the ladies in waiting gently removed Isabel's ornate gown and guided her into a simpler robe, the princess spoke softly, her voice carrying a weary resolve. "I will seek the counsel of scholars and physicians. If it is within our power, this family must end its tradition of close-kin marriages." Mercedes posed, head bowed, her eyes reflecting Isabel's quiet determination. In that hushed dressing room, beneath the low glow of a single lantern, they nurtured a fragile hope that knowledge and science might yet salvage not only Isabel's future, but that of all generations to come. The night air pressed against the window panes like a silent confidant, its gentle sigh weaving through the curtains. Isabel watched the dark branches of the courtyard yews swaying in the breeze, imagining their brittle limbs bending under the weight of centuries of tradition. She felt kinship with those ancient trees, both trapped by inherited patterns, yet both capable of change, if only they dared to reach beyond the visible sky. When finally she lay down on her bed, the fine silken sheets whispered against her chilled skin. Her heart drummed an uncertain lullaby. Each beat echoed the refrain she had voiced an hour before. Seek wisdom, defy convention, protect posterity. The room's shadows seemed to lean closer, as if listening, offering their silent counsel. Isabel closed her eyes and drifted on the cusp of sleep, her mind a gentle tide of ambition and fear, rising and falling in cadence with her breath. Dawn arrived on the whisper of silk banners and the rumble of distant drums. Isabel awoke to the soft glow of morning light filtering through stained glass windows, bathing her chamber in muted hues of rose and amber. She lay still for a moment, feeling the corset tighten against her ribs, as if the very walls of her body had become the palace itself. Girded and stately, outside, trumpets heralded the new day, and fluttering banners painted the sky with hope and ceremony. Rising with deliberate grace, Isabel found herself once more encased in her wedding corset, a garment of immaculate white, embroidered with silver threads and pearls, each stitch pressed into her flesh like a reminder of duty, each pearl a silent witness to her resolve. She imagined the corset as a constellation of tiny guardians, pressing her into an armor of obligation. Though constricting, it also reminded her of the strength that might be harnessed, strength not of muscle or title, but of unwavering purpose. As she descended the grand staircase, the palace itself seemed to awaken in solidarity, its marble columns exhaling cool air that brushed her skin like a lover's farewell kiss. The tapestries lining the walls whispered tales of ancestors who once wielded power in the name of unity and purity. Now, she would tread their halls bearing a different message, that unity need not be bought with suffering, that purity of spirit might transcend bloodlines. Outside the great portal, the city thrummed with anticipation. Colourful pennants danced in the breeze, ribbons twisting around lampposts like the fingers of children, beckoning celebration. The distant murmur of courtiers gathering in the grand hall drifted back to her, mingling with the rhythmic beating of drums and the crisp call of bugles. Isabel inhaled the cool morning air, filling her lungs with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. Today, she would stand before the council, not merely as bride, but as a vessel for change. Upon entering the grand hall, every gaze turned toward her. The hush that fell was like a wave, paused on the brink of crashing. As if the world itself held its breath, Isabel stepped forward, each motion measured and composed. Despite the corset's unforgiving embrace, she saw Archduke Leopold Charles standing beneath the vaulted ceiling, his figure framed by the stained glass light. His gaze met hers with a gentle, respectful nod. In that brief exchange, she sensed a subtle understanding, a tacit acknowledgement that they shared more than politics. They shared a legacy of suffering and a yearning for something beyond prescribed roles. The ceremony unfolded with regal precision. Vows were exchanged. Rings slid onto fingers with whispered promises. The orchestra's strains rose through the hall, each note reverberating against the stone walls like the beating of her own cautious heart. Through the prism of coloured light, Isabel saw herself reflected, a princess in pearls and silk, a scion of a storied dynasty, and yet a woman determined to shape her destiny. When it came time for her own vow, Isabel's voice rang clear through the hush. I pledge my loyalty to the crown and to my noble husband. Come pain or sweetness. Even as the corset constricted her breath, the words resonated with a power she had never known before. The weight of her sentence was balanced by its truth. She would honour her duties, but she would also forge a path guided by reason and compassion. Et her vow. Archduke Leopold's lips curved in a subtle, knowing smile. That fold of his mouth spoke volumes, an unspoken partnership, a mutual respect that transcended the trappings of ceremony. In that instant, the grand hall ceased to be merely a stage for pomp. It became a crucible of possibility, where two souls might unite in purpose, as well as alliance. As the congregation applauded, Isabel felt the ground beneath her feet shift, no longer a trembling surface of fear, but firm soil rich with promise. The stained glass above murmured stories of saints and sacrifice, but to her, it now told a story of renewal. Each shaft of light seemed to root her resolve deeper, until she stood not as a pawn of dynastic design, but as a custodian of hope. When the final hymn faded, the hall dissolved into gentle conversation and muted laughter. Isabel allowed herself a small, private smile as she exchanged a few words with her new husband. His words soft, his gaze steady. In those moments, she sensed the dawn of something profound, a union not only of two royal houses, but of two hearts committed to a shared vision. Later, as they stepped onto the palace terrace, the morning sun glinted off the dew-laden gardens. Isabel inhaled the fragrance of blooming jasmine and frost-touched roses, the scents mingling like comfort and challenge in a single breath. The world stretched before her in a tapestry of colour and sound, yet beneath it lay the quiet pulse of change. And in that hush, as the breeze caressed her cheek, Isabel closed her eyes and whispered her final thought before the day fully broke. She would carry the weight of tradition with her own quiet revolution. For in her heart, the scholar's wisdom and the physician's knowledge had already begun to stir, promising a future where neither body nor blood would define a soul's worth. With sleep-laden certainty, she stepped forward into the new day, her vow resonating like a soft drumbeat in the dawn. The grand banquet hall still thrummed with late evening chatter as gilded platters and silver goblets were cleared away. Candles guttered lightly on ornate candelabras, their flames flickering like weary eyelids at the end of a long day. Under the canopy of carved wood and painted frescoes, Archduke Leopold Charles leaned toward Isabel, his voice a soft murmur amid the clinking of cutlery and the low hum of noble conversation. "Can you endure this?" he asked, his tone gentle, as though worried her corset might constrict not only her form, but her very spirit. Isabel pressed her lips together, willing down the ache that rippled through her spine with every shallow breath. She met his gaze with a fragile steadiness. "I will endure," she replied, her voice little more than a sigh, yet resolute as dawn's first bird call. Beneath the table, hidden from the gilded eyes of courtiers, the Archduke slipped a small glass vial into her palm, a precious gift of opiate balm distilled by the court apothecary. The vial's cool weight pressed reassurance into her hand. In that fleeting moment, the political machinery around them softened into a more human alliance, a shared secret, a tender exchange that hinted at more than mere dynastic duty. The hall's tapestries seemed to lean closer, their threads whispering tales of ancestors who had danced and dined in the very same chamber, yet none, it occurred to Isabel, had ever shared such an intimate act of compassion. The heavy drapes swayed under a wisp of night air, drifting in through a cracked window pane, carrying the faint scent of frost and distant pines. To Isabel, the drapes appeared like protective arms, cradling her vulnerability in the hush of candlelit luxury. The marble floor, cool beneath her slippers, reflected her trembling silhouette, and she felt as though the entire room exhaled a soft breath of relief on her behalf. As the clock's chime echoed through the corridors, notifying late hours, Isabel withdrew with her ladies in waiting. Their silken footsteps trailed behind her on the polished floor as they bore her back to her private suite. The ladies replaced her wedding attire with a simple white silk nightgown, its fabric whispering against her skin like a lullaby. Isabel exhaled deeply. The tight corset finally loosened around her torso and slid away, leaving her ribs to rise and fall with new ease. Her shoulders, uncaged, drooped like long-shadowed willows, and the pain she had borne since dawn ebbed into a distant memory. In that quiet chamber, the embroidered tapestries receded into darkness, and the soft glow of a single lantern cast a halo around Isabel's form. She slipped beneath the down-filled covers of her bed, willing her racing thoughts to calm. Outside, the palace gardens lay hidden in shadow, their sculpted hedges and marble fountains silent as statues awaiting dawn. The night air seeped through some unseen crack, cooling her flushed cheeks and carrying faint echoes of distant owls. Then, a gentle knock. Archduke Leopold entered, garbed in a simple velvet robe the colour of midnight. The lack of ceremony in his attire felt like a quiet confession. Here was a man who sought not pomp but presence. He knelt at the foot of her bed, the lantern's flame glinting once off the silver braid on his cuff. His voice, when he spoke, was as soft as deer's footsteps on winter's snow. "I vow to honour you with dignity and compassion," he said, "to never view your infirmity as shame. Together, we will seek ways to secure our lineage's future." His words settled over her like a warm mantle. Isabel felt tears, unbidden, and profound pool in her eyes. They blurred the lantern's glow into dancing halos. In that moment, titles and alliances dissolved, leaving two souls bound by shared sorrow and a fragile promise of understanding. The Archduke's vow was more precious than any crown, more sustaining than any promise of power. It was a testament to respect, to empathy, and to partnership born of the same ancient wounds their houses had inflicted upon themselves. Outside her window, the moon rose, pale and steady as a guardian. Its silvery light slanted across her pillow, mingling with the lantern's amber warmth. In that blend of gold and silver, Isabel's spirit found a delicate balance, the gold of duty, the silver of hope. She pressed a trembling hand over her heart, feeling the echo of his vow resonating through her chest like a slow, steady drumbeat. Her mind wandered to the generations who had come before ancestors, who had never dared hope for such understanding. She pictured those ancestors' spectres drifting through the gardens, their marble faces softened by moonlight, perhaps nodding in quiet approval at this small act of human kindness. The palace walls, heavy with history, seemed to flex in silent encouragement, as though the very stones craved a different legacy than the one etched in cold marble and whispered in courtly gossip. In the hush that followed, Isabel allowed herself a small, private smile. It felt like the first ray of morning sun after a night of storm. The promise of knowledge and empathy, sealed in that humble vow, glimmered in her thoughts. The pain of her body remained, a persistent ache, like a winter wind at the door. But now it was tempered by the warmth of understanding, by the knowledge that she was not alone. Leopold rose quietly, his figure dissolving into the tapestry of shadows. His final whisper drifted back to her, a soft caress on the edge of sleep. "Rest now, for tomorrow we face the world together." Isabel closed her eyes, the silk of her nightgown cool and comforting against her skin. The lantern's flame flickered its approval, before settling into a steady glow. and as she drifted towards slumber, the palace itself exhaled a gentle sigh, its corridors echoing with the fragile promise of something new, an alliance of hearts rather than crowns. A shared duty to protect both blood and spirit. The grand banquet and the stiff gowns of the morning faded into a distant dream, replaced by the tender knowledge that in the quiet of the night, two wounded souls had discovered the first bud of hope. In that promise, Isabel found the courage to rest, nestling into the soft embrace of her bed, ready to dream of a dawn where understanding could rewrite the story of her lineage and free it from the wounds of its own making. Spring dawned upon Madrid like a drowsy sigh. Soft shafts of golden sunlight slipping through the palace windows and stirring the vast chambers into activity. In her private dressing room, Isabel watched the seamstress's needles dance with unhurried precision. The wedding gown, pure white, embroidered with threads of spun gold and studded with iridescent pearls, lay spread upon a velvet chaise, its voluminous skirt sweeping across the floor like a frozen wave, a delicate overskirt, crafted to conceal her curved back, waited beside the bodice. Its intricate patterns, a testament to the artisan's skill, beneath the crystal chandelier, the gown shimmered like a great swath of crystalline mist caught in the morning light, and Isabel felt a hush of wonder settle over her chest. This garment, she understood, was both her armor and her prison, shielding her from pitying gazes, yet binding her ever tighter to the weight of expectation. The 3 months since her betrothal had unfurled like a procession of long, fragrant petals each week. A new ceremony. Each evening, a fresh banquet. Through it all, her corset had been an unyielding tutor, its steel boning cutting into her flesh with each breath, teaching her the discipline demanded by royalty. Yet Isabel had worn her wincing smiles as carefully as her silk skirts. In audiences with foreign envoys, she had sat poised under gilded arches, exchanging measured pleasantries while her heart churned with quiet rebellion. In whispered halls, she had gleaned tidbits of her future husband's character, that Archduke Leopold Charles possessed a sharp mind for mathematics, a tender ear for music, and a burgeoning passion for scientific inquiry. These fragments of information had kindled a flicker of hope in Isabel's heart. Perhaps this marriage could transcend the hollow alliances of old. Perhaps she might find in Leopold a kindred spirit in her yearning to break the chains of dynastic tradition. Now, on the cusp of their wedding day, the palace hummed with feverish energy. Goldsmiths engraved the royal crest upon goblets and platters, their hammers ringing like distant bells of celebration. Florists draped the corridors in arching swaths of white bird of paradise blossoms, their petals nodding gently as if whispering hopeful secrets. At dawn's first light, the city's drums roused the streets, and pennants of crimson and silver snapped in the breeze like cheerful voices, calling the populace to witness the union. As Isabel prepared to venture forth, her gown in layers of stiff tulle and silk, she felt the air itself pressing against her, urging her onward. The marble staircase stretched before her, its polished surface reflecting her hesitant footsteps. 3 ladies in waiting gathered at her side, their hands supporting the voluminous skirt as if it were a fragment of drifting cloud. Sweat beaded on Isabel's forehead, and she could taste the tang of nervous anticipation. Yet she could not falter. Each step was a testament to her resolve, a proof of her duty to both crown and self. At the cathedral doors, the stained glass windows glowingly awaited, their colours pooling on the stone floor like liquid jewels. Torches lined the nave, casting flickering patterns that danced across Isabel's gown and the silent columns. The gathered nobility formed a hushed cathedral of expectation, their faces a tapestry of admiration and pity. Isabel's heart fluttered with the empathy of every gaze, awed by her beauty yet saddened by her burden. She sensed the cathedral breathing around her, the ancient stones resonating with the weight of centuries of vows and betrayals. Leopold Charles stood at the altar, his tall frame swathed in ceremonial finery, The glow of candlelight traced the angles of his face, softening the lines of his prominent jaw into a gentle curve of compassion. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, Isabel felt the cathedral's breath still, as though the very air paused to witness their connection, their shared histories of pain, of expectation, of inherited frailty, hung unseen between them like a fragile veil. As they knelt together before the altar, their voices rose in unison, reciting the ancient words of binding promise. The strains of organ music swelled through the vaulted arches, vibrating against Isabel's chest, like the pulse of a distant giant. Through the prism of the stained glass, her gown took on hues of rose and emerald, a kaleidoscope of light that danced across her shoulders. She spoke her vow with clarity and quiet strength. I pledge my loyalty to the crown and to you, my husband, in sorrow as in joy. The words carried on her breath like the chorus of a momentous dawn. When it came time to exchange rings, the hush deepened into sacred stillness. As Leopold slipped the ring upon her finger, he bent close, his warm breath brushing her ear. "I promise to care for you above all others," he whispered, his voice soft as falling petals. In that instant, Isabel felt tears bloom at the corners of her vision, tears of relief, of hope, of gratitude. This was no mere diplomatic gesture. It was a declaration of solidarity, a vow of shared strength. The cathedral walls seemed to lean in, embracing their union with a silent benediction. The flickering torchlight painted them in hues of amber and gold, and the cool stone floor felt alive beneath Isabel's knees, grounding her in the promise of transformation. She dared to imagine a future in which their partnership might blossom into something greater than the rigid expectations of birthright, a union founded on empathy, on shared ambition, on the quiet rebellion of two souls determined to heal their lineage's wounds. Outside, the morning sun broke free from grey clouds, sending shafts of radiant warmth through the open doors. The palace gardens glowed with dew-washed blooms, each petal trembling with the possibility of new beginnings. Isabel glanced once more at Leopold, his figure framed by the doorway like a guardian of tomorrow's promise. In that shared glance, she felt the weight of her gown and corset fall away, transformed into the soft fabric of possibility. And so, beneath the vaulted heavens of the cathedral, and the watchful eyes of their ancestors immortalized in stone and glass, Isabel and Leopold embarked on their journey not as mere bride and groom bound by politics, but as partners united by an unspoken vow to rewrite the fate of their house. The silent hope that had flickered within Isabel's heart now burned steady, casting its gentle light across a future where love and science might banish the shadows of inheritance, one tender promise at a time. The euphoria of the wedding soon gave way to the steady rhythm of court life. Isabel and Leopold Charles departed Madrid, behind a cascade of well-wishers and ceremonial trumpets, journeying north to Brussels, the heart of the Low Countries where they would reign. The Palace of Coudenberg rose before them in stately splendor, its turrets and colonnades reminiscent of Madrid's grandeur, yet somehow more intimate its stone walls, seeming to exhale a welcome warmth. Under the pale spring sun, flags bearing their combined heraldry fluttered along the ramparts, as though beckoning them toward a new chapter. Isabella's heart throbbed with a mix of anticipation and weary relief. The palace air smelled of damp stone and budding flowers, a bittersweet contrast to the heated perfume of Madrid's summer courts. Leopold had arranged from the start for a cohort of scholars and physicians to convene at Coudenberg. Chief among them, the renowned Flemish physician, Dr. Van Helmont. In the grand research chamber, a vaulted room lined with oak shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes, Van Helmont unveiled a vast genealogical chart. The parchment crackled softly as he spread it across the table. Under the glow of brass sconces, Isabel traced the lineage of the Habsburgs, each name linked by curling lines to the next. Van Helmont's finger paused at each generation where spinal curvatures, protruding jaws, and premature deaths clustered like dark blossoms. Isabel's breath caught. Her own fragile form seemed mirrored in the static ink of the document. The chart was not a simple record. It was an anthology of suffering, yet in Van Helmont's steady chaser, she discovered not only sorrow, but the faint ember of hope. His voice, measured and low, spoke of observation and emerging scientific method. He spoke of systematic study, of crossbreeding experiments among the court's lesser nobility to reduce deleterious traits. To Isabel, each word was both comfort and challenge. Comfort in the promise that knowledge might redeem her descendants. Challenge in the realization that this war against hereditary vice required unwavering resolve. As the new queen, Isabel threw herself into every aspect of these endeavors. She inaugurated a medical library within the palace walls, filling its shelves with manuscripts from East and West alike. Persian treatises on bone setting, Arabian texts on herbal elixirs, Latin commentaries on human anatomy. The room itself breathed with possibility. High windows draped in velvet allowed pale light to fall upon rows of scrolls, while a bronze bell invited visiting scholars to convene for daily discourse. Beside her, Leopold Charles established a fledgling genetic society, funding the printing of pioneering dissertations and encouraging open debate in the very halls where protocol normally reigned supreme. Resistance swiftly followed innovation. Conservative courtiers whispered that to tamper with dynastic unions was to trample on venerable tradition. They feared change more than stagnation. Yet Isabel and Leopold stood firm. The future of our lineage must be the supreme priority, they declared in solemn joint edicts. Each proclamation was delivered not with the thunder of royal decree, but with the quiet conviction of shared purpose. Even amid the clamour of scholarship and the hush of library corridors, the strain of their efforts weighed on them. One late afternoon, they slipped away to the palace gardens, seeking solace beneath the arching branches of the cherry blossom trees. Petals drifted down like pale snow, carpeting the gravel paths. The blossoms trembled in the breeze, as though offering their own fragile vow of renewal. Isabel rested her hand on a gnarled branch, its aged bark pressing a reassuring firmness into her palm. Leopold stepped close, his presence a steadying force. In that secluded sanctuary, Isabel unburdened the ache that had become part of her very flesh. "The corset," she murmured, eyes closed against the drifting petals. "Each tightening feels like another chain around my spine." Her voice quavered, as though the trees themselves bent to hear. Leopold reached out and gently pressed his fingers at the small of her back, mindful of the pain he could never fully know. "I despise my impotence in your suffering," he confessed, voice soft with regret. "If I could bear your pain for you, I would gladly do so." The confession floated between them like a shared breeze. For a moment, the blossoms above seemed to pulse with understanding, their pale petal quivering in quiet empathy. Isabel opened her eyes and found strength in Leopold's sympathetic gaze. In response, she laid a hand over his heart, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. "Then let us bear this burden together," she whispered. "Let us forge a legacy not of sorrow, but of compassion and discovery. Our union need not be merely political, it can be personal, born of mutual care." A blossom fell onto Isabel's hair, settling like a soft promise. Leopold picked it gently from her locks and tucked it behind her ear. The tiny flower, pale as moonlight, seemed to symbolize their shared commitment, a delicate pledge to nurture the promise of tomorrow. In the hush of the garden, they made a silent pact to face the trials ahead, not as ruler and subject, but as partners bound by love and respect. As twilight deepened, the garden lanterns flickered on, casting dappled shadows across their entwined forms. The world beyond Coudenberg's walls receded, its politics and prejudices muted by the gentle hum of cicadas. Here, in this hidden grove, Isabel and Leopold found the courage to persist. They would return to their duties tomorrow, to council chambers and research seminars, to libraries and laboratories, Yet they carried with them the memory of this moment, two souls, amid cherry blossoms, forging a bond of empathy. In the following days, the palace hallways echoed not only with scholarly debate, but with quiet steps of mutual support. When Isabel limped into the medical library, Leopold offered his arm. When he tired in a lengthy discourse, she pressed a cool cloth to his brow. Their partnership became a living testament to the power of shared burdens. Even their detractors could not dismiss the quiet strength they exuded the white blossoms, and the scholarly charts alike seemed to bow to this new alliance. Through it all, Isabel's heart settled into a steady rhythm, bolstered by the knowledge that she was no longer alone in her fight. The promise of science and the warmth of companionship intertwined like ivy on the palace walls, fragile yet unbreakable, and as she lay awake in the hush of her chamber each night, the gentle rustle of cherry blossom petals and the faint echo of her vow sustained her that through knowledge, compassion, and unity, they might at last transcend the old curses of their blood. In that soft embrace of possibility, Isabel closed her eyes, her spirit soothed by the memory of shared hope, ready to dream of the day when her lineage would flourish free from the shadows of its past. Life in Brussels unfolded like a slow, deliberate heartbeat, steady with promise, yet punctuated by challenges that tested Isabel's resolve. Each week, she would make her way to the medical chamber of Dr. Carlos de Salamanca, the first physician bold enough to speak openly of consanguineous inheritance. The room was hushed, its stone walls lined with shelves of anatomical drawings. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting pale rectangles on the tile floor, as if marking the passing of time itself. Dr. Carlos greeted her with a solemn nod, his hand steady as he measured the angle of her spine with a brass protractor. Isabel felt the cool metal press into her flesh, a gentle reminder of her body's betrayal. Yet in her chest, determination flared like a hidden ember. She did not endure these trials for herself alone, but for every child who might one day carry Habsburg blood. As he recorded her measurements in faded script, he prescribed new exercises, slow, sinewy stretches that felt like a dance between agony and release. Each extension brought a tremor through her limbs, each breath a testament to her quiet courage. Afterwards, she would sit by the long oak table, tracing her fingers over the grain worn smooth by countless consultations. Shadows spilled across the surface as clouds drifted past the window, mirroring Isabel's own shifting moods from hope's bright gleam to the grey weight of worry. Yet each ache, each note in her medical ledger, was a step toward knowledge, a beacon that had the power to reshape destiny. Leopold Charles, equally steadfast, summoned experts from across Europe, anatomists from Vienna, midwives from Florence, herbalists from Andalusia, by his side. The research society swelled in membership. Halls at the universities of Leuven and Leiden echoed with impassioned debate on heredity. Isabel exchanged letters with Lady Margaret Cavendish, an English scholar whose inked pages brimmed with essays on dynastic rights and women's autonomy. Their correspondence flew secretly between courts, sowing whispers of a progressive queen and a scientific alliance that gently disturbed the old order. But amid this flowering of intellect, a missive arrived from Madrid, inked in the familiar hand of her father, King Philip IV. He urged them to produce heirs swiftly, to cement their throne with the unbroken line of Habsburg blood. Isabel's stomach tightened as she read his words, their weight settling like a stone of duty on her chest. Leopold and Isabel shared a look of weary understanding. The pressure to bear children brought with it the spectre of inherited afflictions. They pondered a plan, whispered in cautious tones, an advanced regimen of rest during pregnancy, medical supervision at every stage, gentle birthing techniques designed to minimize trauma to both mother and child. Yet in the hush of their private moments, between the rustle of vellum pages and the soft sigh of the wind through the palace colonnades, their bond deepened. One afternoon, seeking solace from debates and designs, they slipped into the palace vineyard. The grapevines arched overhead in rippling waves of green, sunlight dancing through the glossy leaves like living emeralds. Beneath that gentle canopy, they paused, their hands searching until they found one another's. Leopold drew from his pocket a slim golden ring, an unadorned circle that gleamed with promises more profound than any jeweled circlet. He slipped it onto Isabel's finger with reverent care. "We shall conquer the curse," he murmured, his voice a soft echo of rustling leaves. The ring felt surprisingly heavy, as though carrying the weight of their shared vow. Isabel lifted her gaze, her eyes shining with tears unshed. The sunlight painted halos around her curls. "And we will show the world that power can stand hand in hand with compassion and science," she replied, her whisper mingling with the gentle breath of vines overhead. In that moment, the world beyond Brussels, its parchments, its protocols, its centuries of unspoken dread, faded into background noise. Here, in the stillness between leaf and sky, they nurtured a new hope that their union, forged in respect and mutual purpose, could blossom into a legacy of health and understanding for all their descendants. The vineyard air seemed to hold its breath, the vines swaying in silent approval. Shadows lengthened as day, softened into dusk. But Isabel felt neither fatigue nor fear. Instead, her heart hummed with anticipation of challenges to come. Scientific gatherings, private councils, the cautious steps toward motherhood. Each promise they made in this secluded bower imparted a gentle strength, a reassurance that their combined efforts might indeed bend the arc of destiny. That evening, the palace candles flickered to life, and Isabel slipped back into her chambers, aware of the delicate balance she maintained between the weight of tradition and the buoyancy of inquiry, between the ache of her physical form and the lightness of her spirit. As she prepared for the night, she traced the ring on her finger, feeling its smooth surface press, affirming warmth into her skin. The day's events measuring spinal curvature, drafting new therapeutic protocols, sharing rings beneath singing vines wove together in her mind like a tapestry of quiet triumphs. In the hush before sleep, she imagined the generations to come children, unburdened by the unseen chains of consanguinity, heirs raised with the promise of both noble blood and mindful science. She envisioned scholars debating her reforms in distant halls, midwives using the gentle birthing practices she and Leopold championed, families freed from the sorrow that once haunted the Habsburg line. Slowly, her eyelids fluttered closed, and the vineyard leaves outside her window whispered lullabies of vine and sky. The ring on her finger glinted once in the lantern's glow, a silent sentinel for dreams of healing and hope. In that soft embrace of night, Isabel surrendered to slumber, her heart alight with the knowledge that, hand in hand with Leopold, she had already taken the first steps toward a future where compassion and science would guide her house into a new dawn. Months drifted by as softly as autumn leaves fluttering to the earth. And at last the Palace of Brussels teemed with excitement for the inauguration of the new Genetic Research Institute, an institution of Isabel's own design, over which she now presided. The morning air carried a crisp tang of rust and spice, as scarlet and amber foliage swayed outside, whispering of change. Inside the grand hall, rows of scholars and dignitaries clustered beneath vaulted ceilings, their breath forming gentle plumes in the cool hush. Isabel stood at the dais, her heart, a slow drumbeat, echoing in her ears. As she prepared to speak, she gazed out over the assembly, men in velvet coats and women in silken gowns, all faces eager, yet edged with the gravity of what lay before them. A hush fell soft as the rustle of wind through dying leaves. In her hand, Isabel held her notes. Though she scarcely needed them, the weight of her conviction poured forth from memory. "Our house," she began, voice low yet clear, "has paid too dear a price. Consanguineous inheritance has wrought deformity and sorrow among our own blood. Each word settled like a seed into the fertile minds before her. Today, we vow to broaden our horizons, to embrace unions outside our lineage, and to safeguard the future. Her phrase lingered in the air. And when it met the patient silence of the hall, a wave of applause unfurled like gentle wind stirring the trees. At her side, Leopold Charles, his tall silhouette framed in amber light, beamed with pride. His eyes glistened with unshed emotion as he turned to the assembled guests. "It is by her courage and wisdom," he intoned, "that we have this chance to reshape destiny." His words, buoyed by Isabel's earlier vow, struck a chord that resonated through the rows of spectators. In that moment, the palace no longer felt like an ancient monument to tradition, but a living vessel for new ideas. Yet Isabel, sensing the fragile nature of progress, felt her chest tighten with cautious hope. In the weeks that followed, ripples of her speech spread beyond Brussels. Noble families across Western Europe sent envoys to see these innovations for themselves. Young princes and princesses arrived to study in the Institute's lecture halls and laboratories, their faces alight with curiosity. They pored over charts of genealogies and case studies, eager to learn how genetics and medical science might be harnessed to protect their own bloodlines. Each lecture Isabel gave, each demonstration of the new therapies, was met with nods of fascination and murmurs of approval that warmed her more deeply than any fire. But not all hearts welcomed such change. From the corridors of power in Madrid came murmurs of dismay. Some of her father's closest advisers whispered that Isabel had overstepped her station, that defying centuries of royal custom was tantamount to rebellion. Rumours slithered through the capital, the Queen's misplaced ambition, her challenge to patriarchal order, her threat to the sanctity of dynastic bonds. Isabel pictured those voices as crows, circling in a bleak autumn sky, their wings blotting out confidence. Yet alongside fear, she felt resolve burn brighter. She and Leopold would soon depart for Madrid, and she steeled herself for the storm that awaited. Before that journey, they chose to kindle one last spark of joy, a farewell ball in the glittering halls of Coudenberg. The palace seemed to glow from within, as thousands of candles illuminated marble floors and tapestries that draped like silent witnesses to history. Music seeped through every archway, a tender chandelier of notes that swayed and dipped, coaxing dancers into gentle reels. Isabel, resplendent in a gown of pale gold that mirrored the autumn light, moved among friends and allies, exchanging laughter soft as falling leaves. Yet even in revelry, her thoughts drifted to the journey ahead. She languidly touched the pearls at her throat, each one a reminder of the promise she had made. When Leopold found her beneath a fresco of cherubs dancing among vines, he took her hand and guided her to the center of the floor. They moved slowly, their steps unhurried as though time itself had laced their slippers. In that dance, Isabel felt the steady pulse of shared purpose, the orchestration of two hearts moving in tandem toward uncharted horizons. As midnight neared, the revelers spilled onto the terrace, where the full moon hung like a silver blossom in a velvet sky. Gentle breezes carried the scent of jasmine and fading roses. In this hush, Isabel perched on a marble bench, and with a trembling voice, she began an ancient lullaby, its melody a winding thread weaving through memories of freedom and hope. The song's soft notes drifted over the courtyard, caressing the arches and kissing the statues with a tender farewell. Leopold sat beside her, shoulder brushing hers in quiet solidarity. When her final note melted into the night, he gathered her in his arms, whispering in her ear, "Though politics may blaze with fire, we remain steadfast." His words, soft as a falling leaf, settled into her heart. In the moonlight, his embrace felt like the first true home she had known since childhood, a place where burdens lightened and resolve grew firm. The ball's music faded into distant echoes as the guests retreated, their footsteps a soft percussion on marble tiles. Isabel and Leopold lingered a moment longer, letting the cool night air soothe their cheeks. The world beyond those palace walls was uncertain and perilous. But within this embrace, they found a sanctuary of mutual trust. When at last they turned to depart, the palace seemed to sigh in approval. Its ancient stones warmed by the memory of their union. Leaves on the garden's trees rustled in parting applause, as though pledging their own loyalty to the couple's cause. In that quiet offering of nature's blessing, Isabel felt the weight of anxiety ease, replaced by a gentle confidence. Their carriage awaited, the horses stamping softly in the dew-laden night. As they climbed inside, Isabel settled against plush velvet cushions. Tuxedoed by shadows and moonlight, Leopold stroked her hand, and in the silence of the carriage, their shared vow echoed once more to return to Madrid, not as mere pawns of dynasty, but as bearers of hope for a lineage defined by love and reason. As the carriage rolled through empty streets, Isabel pressed her forehead to the cool glass window. Watching the moon fade behind rooftops, sleep beckoned her like a consoling friend, its lullaby weaving through her mind. In the hush of that autumn night, with Leopold's promise echoing softly in her thoughts, she drifted toward rest, ready to face the dawn of Madrid's trials with heart and mind entwined. Hopeful that their gentle revolution would take root and blossom over future generations. The carriage wheels rolled over Madrid's cobblestones, rattling like distant murmurs of uncertainty. As Isabel and Leopold Charles returned to a city both familiar and strangely altered, the grand facades of the palace loomed before them. Stone gargoyles and stately columns etched in shadow beneath midday sun. The walls seemed to sigh with memory echoes of old glories and whispered sorrows carried on the breeze. Rumours had preceded their arrival that the Queen had transgressed sacred tradition, that she had dared to challenge the bloodlines of emperors. Yet as they stepped onto the marble steps, a different chorus greeted them, a procession of scholars, doctors, and young medical students bearing banners of hope rather than condemnation. Their eyes, once filled with condescension, now glimmered with cautious anticipation, as if seeing Isabel anew not as a fragile figure bound by lineage, but as a harbinger of progress. In the grand council chamber, heavy tapestries muted the echoes of gathered courtiers. Candlelight shimmered on polished surfaces, flickering in rhythm with Isabel's heartbeat. She stood before her father, King Philip IV, and the assembly of dignitaries, parchment in hand. The wood-panelled walls listened as she unfurled the findings of the Brussels Genetic Society. Her voice, though hushed, carried a clear authority. Esteemed council, our research demonstrates a marked reduction in congenital afflictions when unions extend beyond immediate kin, supported by targeted medical interventions. She tapped the parchment, revealing charts of declining deformity rates and carefully logged patient outcomes. The data glowed under the lamplight, transforming abstract lines into a story of potential healing. For a moment, the chamber held its breath, rows of ministers silent, their breathing caught between tradition and evidence. The only sound was the soft rustle of silk gowns and the distant chime of the palace clock. Then, in a gesture both deliberate and weighty, King Philip inclined his head. His gaze, once a blade of cold steel, softened as he met his daughter's determined eyes. "You have brought hope to our house," he pronounced, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the rafters. In that instant, centuries of rigid custom loosened their grip like autumn leaves drifting free. Relief surged through Isabel like warm sunlight breaking through grey clouds. She could feel the tension drain from her shoulders, replaced by the gentle warmth of vindication. The first hurdle had been cleared. The throne had acknowledged the necessity of change. Murmurs of approval cascaded through the council chamber, like ripples across a placid lake. With the king's consent, the royal marriage statutes were amended henceforth. Princes and princesses would have the right to seek spouses outside their immediate lineage. Under the guidance of the newly empowered Genetic Council, this decree, delivered in the hush of that storied hall, sent shockwaves across Europe. Nobles and monarchs alike halted in their tracks. Pondering the dawn of a new era, Isabel's mind drifted, as if carried on the soft edge of a dream, to images of generations yet unborn. She saw children raised in health, their laughter echoing through palace gardens, unburdened by preordained fates. She saw young couples choosing partners, not by the closeness of blood, but by the promise of mutual respect and affection. And she saw her own reflection in every hopeful eye, a queen who had wielded knowledge and compassion as her weapons. Reshaping destiny itself, Leopold Charles, standing close at her side, reached for her hand, his fingers entwined with hers. A quiet anchor in the swirl of excitement. He offered her a proud smile, one that spoke of shared victory and the deep bond they had forged. In that moment, the grandeur of bricks and mortar faded into the background. All that mattered was the pulse they felt in one another's touch. They had shown that love and reason need not be rivals, but companions on the path of progress. When the council adjourned, they stepped into the courtyard beneath a sky, so impossibly blue it seemed, woven from prayer and promise. The sun, now gentle, filtered through newly budded trees, their leaves whispering of renewal. Isabel closed her eyes, breathing in the crisp air, the distant hum of celebration drifting upward in waves. She felt as though the very walls of Madrid exhaled a sigh of relief, welcoming in the warmth of a future unshackled by ancient burdens. The couple walked the length of the courtyard's marble terrace, their steps echoing softly in the hush. Each footfall seemed to mark a beat in the city's evolving heartbeat, a rhythm of transformation set in motion by a queen's unwavering will. Around them, courtiers and scholars exchanged excited glances. Even the palace guards, stern and statuesque, allowed faint smiles to flicker across their features. Isabel glanced at Leopold and saw his gaze alight with the same dreamy resolve that stirred within her own heart. "We have witnessed the beginning," he murmured, voice soft against the canvas of sky. "Yet the road ahead remains long." She nodded, her breath a gentle fog before her lips. "But we have shown that courage tempered by knowledge can bend the arc of history," she replied, her tone rich with quiet triumph. As they strolled deeper into the garden grove, the newly planted orchards bowed beneath their blossoms, each flower a symbol of fragile yet determined growth. Isabel reached out to touch a petal, its soft pink surface brushing her fingertips like a whispered promise. In that tender contact, she sensed the unity of purpose that bound them not only as sovereigns, but as stewards of hope for a lineage once marred by its own devotion to purity. Twilight gathered at the edges of the world, the sky blending gold with amethyst in a gentle farewell to the day. Lanterns hanging from boughs flickered to life, casting a soft glow that danced upon the paths. The palace behind them, once imposing and distant, now felt like a guardian rather than a jailer, a place where progress could take root and flourish. Hand in hand, Isabel and Leopold paused beneath an ancient orange tree, its fruit heavy with promise. The breeze stirred the leaves, and in their rustle, Isabel heard the soft applause of the earth itself. She leaned into Leopold, her head resting against his shoulder, as if drawing strength from his steady presence. "Our house shall rise anew," she whispered, strong, but gentle, proud, yet compassionate. He kissed the top of her head, the gesture tender as the falling petals at their feet. Under that vast Madrid sky, now tinged with the first stars, their hearts beat in quiet harmony. They had dared to dream beyond the narrow confines of ancestry, to weave together science and empathy into the tapestry of their reign. And as the night enveloped them, Isabel allowed herself a final, peaceful breath. The future lay before them, uncharted and luminous, yet no longer shrouded in the fear of inherited curses. In its place shone the steadfast light of hope, bright, enduring, and born of the courage and love that only two determined hearts could kindle. After the royal marriage decree was amended in Madrid, Isabel and Leopold Charles found themselves not merely symbols of innovation, but the spiritual leaders of a burgeoning scientific movement, the Royal Medical Initiative. Aged dame, Isabel rose with a gentle weariness, warmed by the knowledge that change had begun. The city stirred around her coaches, rattling over cobblestones, merchants arranging their stalls, church bells tolling like measured heartbeats, yet within her, a quieter pulse guided her every step, the steady conviction that through knowledge and compassion, she could reshape destiny. Before long, they extended their network across Europe. In Antwerp, Isabel dispatched a delegation led by Dr. van Helmont and esteemed Flemish scholars to the University of Leiden. There, they exchanged Eastern manuscripts on heredity, ancient scrolls filled with Arabic script, and demonstrations of the latest physical therapies. The fragile parchments, fresh from Baghdad's workshops, contained translations of the Kitab al-Tashri, an unparalleled treatise on bone structure and advanced orthopedics. Isabel imagined the vellum unfurling under oil lamps, each page whispering a promise of deeper understanding. She pictured scholars poring over those texts by candlelight, their eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. Even in her drowsiest moments, the very thought set her heart to a hurried rhythm of anticipation. Within the walls of Coudenberg Palace, every afternoon brought a gathering in the Royal Library. The vast room breathed with the weight of thousands of medical, astronomical, mathematical, and philosophical volumes. Shelves loomed like silent sentinels, their spines worn by centuries of inquiry. Here, ministers and courtiers, once forbidding, now leaned forward in curiosity, shedding their usual reserve to ask pointed questions and challenge established dogma. Isabel presided over these assemblies with a serene patience, encouraging each voice to rise. The library lamps glowed like moons in a velvet sky, illuminating eager faces and the flutter of turning pages, as professors from England, Italy, and Germany arrived to debate the finer points of genetics. Isabel felt the air itself grow charged with possibility. The palace, once a fortress of rigid tradition, had begun to hum with the pulse of intellectual life. Amid this flourishing, a letter arrived bearing the seal of Emperor Ferdinand II, Leopold's uncle, summoning them to Vienna. They would discuss an expanded Habsburg alliance at the Hofburg. Isabel donned her most sober gown and travelled beside Leopold, each carriage mile thick with expectation. The Hofburg's gilded halls radiated centuries of imperial decree. But Isabel stepped forward, not as a supplicant, but as a commissioner of science. In the splendid ceremonial chamber, she presented preliminary findings: dynastic marriages outside immediate kin reduced congenital defects by half when paired with modern medical support. The assembled Austrian court barons, bishops, and philosophers leaned in as she outlined her proposal for a household health fund dedicated to underwriting medical research for royal offspring. The crystal chandeliers trembled as her words settled over the crowd like a solemn vow. The emperor's initial surprise softened into contemplation, and by the end of that day, he had agreed to establish a joint committee spanning Madrid, Brussels, and Vienna. Isabel felt a warmth bloom within her validation. Yes, but more profoundly, the quiet pride of one who had turned hope into policy. Returning to Brussels, Isabel's thoughts danced between gratitude and fatigue. Preparations began for the formal inauguration of the Household Health Fund in the Grote Markt. The square, usually serene, now thrummed with life pennants, snapped in the breeze like eager voices, and flowers woven into garlands, draped across lampposts like suspended prayers. Townsfolk gathered in clusters, their faces a mosaic of curiosity and acclaim, as she stood upon the dais, Kate's keen edge softened in the face of so much genuine goodwill. Isabel raised her hand to still the crowd, her voice carrying on the crisp autumn air. We cannot sacrifice our descendants on the altar of narrow alliances. A lineage is strongest when its people are cared for in body and spirit alike. Her words unfurled like a banner across the market, met by a rolling tide of applause that resonated from cobblestone to cathedral spire. For the first time, a delegation from Madrid arrived in support, their presence a testament to the depth of change. Isabel's pulse steadied as she recognized among them advisors once skeptical, now converted by evidence and empathy. Even the palace guards allowed proud smiles as they saluted the Queen, their rigid discipline softened by hope. When evening fell, and the lamps were lit along the canal's edge, Isabel and Leopold walked side by side beside the gently rippling water. The narrowboats drifted past, their oars whispering lullabies against the stone embankment. The city lights shimmered on the surface like distant stars fallen to earth. Leopold took her hand in his, the warmth of his palm a balm to her tired spirit. "We have taken a great stride," he murmured, voice hushed as a rustle of leaves. "But our journey is not done. We must persist, for countless generations await." Isabel's eyes reflected the dancing lanterns. She drew in a slow breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, as though inhaling every promise the night could offer. "I have found my true purpose," she replied softly, as the moonlight danced upon her cheek, "not only as wife or mother, but as one who lights the path for our house's future." In that shared silence, broken only by the canal's gentle sigh, her own ache seemed to fade, replaced by an ember of undying hope. Under the protective canopy of Madrid's newly kindled blue sky, their hearts beat in quiet but steadfast harmony. Though whispering winds spoke of challenges still to come, Isabel felt within her a serene confidence that love, guided by reason, and courage, tempered by compassion, would forever steer her house toward a dawn where no child would bear the burden of outdated traditions, only the promise of a healthier, brighter tomorrow. Winter descended once more upon Brussels, draping the city in a pale hush as snowflakes drifted like whispered promises from a grey sky. Within the palace corridors, each footstep echoed softly against stone, an echo of the patient persistence with which Isabel faced another season of pain. Yet this winter brought a subtle thaw. Her condition had begun to stabilize under Dr. Van Helmont's combined regimen of physical therapy and Eastern herbal analgesics. She arrived in the treatment chamber each morning to the comforting warmth of candles set on polished wooden stands. Their flickering flames cast dancing shadows upon the walls, lending the space an almost sacred serenity. The air carried the faint scent of horse chestnut extract and seaweed salve ingredients from the far reaches of the empire, blended into concoctions that seeped into her aching joints. Dr. Van Helmont, his eyes gentle behind round spectacles, guided her through a new set of exercises. He combined carefully calibrated acupuncture points with Western-style massages, pressing and releasing tension along her spine with hands that seemed to understand the language of her pain. Isabel felt each needle as a soft envoy of relief seep into her muscles, each kneading stroke loosening the knots of agony. Though the ache never vanished entirely, it receded to a distant murmur, like wind through frosted branches, still present, but no longer an unrelenting storm. For the first time, she found herself believing that long-term relief might be more than a dream. Throughout the palace, whispers of gratitude for the Queen's pioneering spirit fluttered through the grand halls. Courtiers paused by her portrait in the audience room and murmured, "Had she not roused us? Would we ever have confronted the spectre of our own bloodlines?" Noble women from distant courts requested permission to study medicine under her patronage, while princely houses quietly revised their marital customs. The air felt electric with hopeful chatter. It was as though the very stones of Coudenberg had absorbed Isabel's perseverance and now radiated encouragement in every corner. Meanwhile, the momentum of their reforms surged beyond Brussels. At the International Medical Congress in Paris, Leopold Charles himself presented the Brussels findings to an assembly of Europe's leading physicians. His voice resonated within the Grand Palais des Sciences, painting her homeland's experiment as a clarion call to all royal houses. Diagrams of genetic pedigrees and therapeutic protocols unfurled on the projection screen. Each statistic, a testament to the power of enlightened policy. When he finished, the lecture hall erupted in applause, a ripple that rolled across national boundaries. Reports of his address filled newspapers from Vienna to London, their headlines lauding the union of science and statecraft. Isabel's modest heart swelled as she read letters of congratulations from the Queen of England, from professors at the Sorbonne, even from academicians in St. Petersburg. Each missive was like a warm ember, stoking her conviction that this path, fraught though it had been, was indeed the right one. In the quiet of their private apartments, Isabel and Leopold's bond deepened with each shared triumph. They mapped out plans for their future children, at least two, planned with care, under the new protocols of the Brussels Genetic Council. Isabel imagined them in cradle beds lined with soft silk, monitored from their first heartbeat by midwives trained in gentle birthing techniques. Leopold, with a thoughtful furrow on his brow, sketched schedules for prenatal rest, then slipped his hand into hers with a tender smile that lit her spirit. Their whispered promises at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve harmonized with the distant roar of fireworks over the palace rooftops. "The road ahead may challenge us," he murmured, "but we walk it together." Isabel pressed her head to his chest, feeling the reassuring drum of his heart echo her own, and whispered back, "We are never alone." When the first blossoms of spring dared to bloom, the Palace of Madrid prepared for a momentous gathering. Youthful princes and princesses from across Europe were summoned to learn the Brussels protocols firsthand. The Court Genetic Assembly, once a murmured idea, now released its inaugural handbook, a compendium of experiments, data analyses, and guidelines to mitigate psychological stress in royal children. The great hall brimmed with curiosity as inheritors of thrones sat upon velvet benches, their eyes bright behind ornate masks. Isabel, standing regally yet warmly approachable, greeted each young visitor with a mother's kindness. Despite the residual twinge in her back, she offered a genuine smile that spoke of shared understanding. Outside, the palace gardens awoke in a riot of colour tulips and hyacinths, nodding in the breeze as if applauding the new era. The benches beneath cherry trees bore the weight of solemn conversation and quiet mentorship. In those shaded nooks, Isabel spoke to a young duke about the importance of empathy in governance. Elsewhere, Leopold guided a princess through the basics of pedigree charting. The garden paths themselves seemed to swirl with the echoes of nascent ideas, petals dancing like fleeting thoughts in the soft wind. As the afternoon light softened into golden glow, Isabel retreated to a bench near the lily pond, where the water's surface mirrored a sky turning rosier with the promise of evening. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythmic breath of wind through willows soothe her. In the chorus of frogs and the hum of distant conversation, she heard the true measure of her legacy, a future where royal offspring would know not only the weight of blood, but the strength of knowledge and compassion. Each ripple in the pond was a heartbeat of hope, carrying her dreams onward like gentle waves toward distant shores. Perhaps, she thought, this was the highest form of love, to transform inherited burdens into collective wisdom, to ensure that the curses of the past yielded to the science of tomorrow. And nestled in the warm dusk of that spring afternoon, Isabel allowed sleep's embrace to beckon her toward repose. Secure in the knowledge that her lineage, fortified by both heart and intellect, would flourish in the light of this new dawn. 3 years after their wedding day, a hush of wonder settled across Europe as the news broke. Princess Isabel and Archduke Leopold Charles had welcomed 2 robust princes into the world, children of royal blood yet untouched by the genetic shadows that had haunted their house. In the chill of a Brussels dawn, courtiers whispered that the Habsburg curse had, at last, been laid to rest. Across the continent, Crowned heads leaned in closer from the salons of Paris to the banks of the Thames and the Vistula's gentle flow. Foreign courts dispatched princesses and physicians alike to witness the royal medical model firsthand. Isabel felt the weight of expectation as a gentle breeze ruffling the curtains of her morning chamber. Each congratulatory letter carried the warmth of distant firesides, inked pledges of admiration from France, England, and Poland. Yet beyond the gilded accolades, Isabel's thoughts returned always to her own family's journey. She recalled the whispered fears of midwives, the cautious hopes of her own first labour, the tremor in Leopold's voice as their eldest son opened his eyes to a world free of inherited afflictions. Those memories, fragile as frost-laden blossoms, blossomed now into something sturdier, a quiet confidence that even the most entrenched curse could yield to the steady touch of knowledge and compassion. Determined to leverage this moment, Isabel established the Royal Medical Scholarship Fund. She envisioned bright-eyed youths, once barred by birth and station, now studying alongside the nobility in the lecture halls of Brussels and Leiden. Each morning, the sunlight flooded the corridors of the medical academy, illuminating hopeful faces from modest homes who now learned anatomy and physiology with the same intensity as aristocratic scions. Isabel championed the inclusion of women in these programs, hitherto unheard of in royal circles. She imagined pages fluttering with the names of Dutch, French, and Italian girls, each one a promise of fresh perspective in the healing arts. As the first cohort secured places, Isabel felt a thrill as delicate and profound as the turning of a page in a beloved book, one that signals the start of a new chapter. Meanwhile, back in Madrid, King Philip IV observed these triumphs with quiet pride and a rekindled paternal glow. He bestowed upon his daughter the title of High Queen Regent, granting her authority over the newly formed National Health Council. The council chambers, once echoing only with matters of state, now resonated with discussions of sanitation, nutrition, and insurance. Under Isabel's hand, the world's first royal health insurance statute took shape. She crafted its provisions with meticulous care coverage for surgical procedures, subsidies for medicinal herbs, and support for urban wellness projects, extending from palace courtyards to taverns and workshops. When the decree was announced, the plazas of Madrid buzzed with astonishment and gratitude. Commoners and courtiers alike recognized that the monarchy had, at last, made the health of its people a sacred duty. As winter's frost melted into spring, Isabel and Leopold extended an invitation to Pope Clement XI, inviting him to Brussels for a momentous council at the royal convent. The evening sun cast long shadows over the convent's cloister, its ancient stones warmed by the soft echo of church bells. Isabel, resplendent in simple robes of dove grey, presented the Pope with a comprehensive model of the Royal Medical Initiative, the integration of science and charity, the collaboration among courts and scholars, and the heartbeat of compassion that underscored every reform. Pope Clement's eyes, framed by generations of faith, brightened as he listened. In a voice resonant with solemn joy, he issued a decree urging all Catholic realms to regard human health as a sacred trust. In that moment, Isabel's work transcended politics. It became a moral imperative woven into the very fabric of Christendom. The stones of the convent, centuries old, seemed to hum in benediction as the Pope blessed the initiative, lending it an authority both spiritual and temporal. At home, the royal children, her two sons, grew into bright, inquisitive lads, whose laughter echoed through the palace gardens like birdsong at dawn. Isabel and Leopold guided their education with gentle rigor morning lessons in Latin and mathematics. Afternoons spent in the curator's greenhouse, observing specimens of medicinal plants. In the marble alcoves of the library, the princes traced diagrams of cellular structure, their small fingers marking the pages of texts gifted by foreign academies. Isabel watched them with a mother's soft pride. Each discovery they made felt like a fragrant blossom unfolding under her care. On the occasion of her eldest son's 5th birthday, Isabel staged a modest but heartfelt demonstration. In the grand hall, small gilded lecterns held charts of inheritance patterns. The young prince, barely able to stand without assistance, to read aloud a simple pedigree chart, reciting after his mother the words that linked science to survival. The hall, filled with noble spectators, fell into a hush of wonder. For a fleeting moment, Isabel saw entire futures reflected in her son's bright eyes. Futures where knowledge trumped superstition, where policy echoed the gentle rhythms of life itself. As the candles guttered and the wistful strains of a harp lulled the celebration to a close, Isabel permitted herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The grand windows looked out on a star-pocked sky, and the hush of night seemed to murmur its own approval. She pressed a hand to her heart, feeling the steady warmth of triumph. Around here, the palace, once a bastion of unyielding tradition, had been transformed into a cradle of healing and hope. In the soft glow of that evening, Isabel closed her eyes to the whisper of her own story, unfolding one born of duty, hardened by struggle, and ennobled by compassion. The future lay before her like a path illuminated by lanterns of progress, each step guided by the shared faith of a family and a world willing to change. And in that lullaby of victory and promise, Isabel allowed herself to drift towards sleep, secure in the knowledge that her legacy would ripple outward, carrying the promise of health and human dignity through generations yet to come. 5 years have passed since their wedding day, and the Brussels palace now gleams with a warmth that transcends mere royal splendor. The wrought-iron balconies catch the morning light like polished bronze, and the gardens ring with the laughter of children whose ancestors might once have suffered under the weight of inherited maladies. For Isabel, each dawn brings a quiet thrill as she remembers how far they have come. Her Royal Medical Scholarship Fund has borne fruit, sending hundreds of doctors and nurses into the world prepared to heal. The corridors of the palace hospitals echo with footsteps of healers trained under her patronage, their voices soft comforts to the ailing. The gentle hum of progress washes over her like a soothing breeze, for she knows that the standard once confined to royal children now extends to ordinary citizens across the continent. Leopold Charles has added his own legacy to theirs, a tome titled Dynastic Genetics and Royal Policy, a weighty volume of more than 10 chapters that distills their decade of research and reform into a blueprint for enlightened governance. Held in hand, its gold-embossed spine feels comforting, as though containing within it the collective heartbeat of every life they have touched. Professors at the Sorbonne and Oxford pore over its pages in their candlelit studies, their pens scratching notes in margins that glow with the promise of interdisciplinary insight. When Isabel imagines scholars weaving its teachings into lecture courses, she feels a serene pride, the pride of one who has planted seeds in fertile minds. Within the palace walls, intrigue has given way to the quiet stirrings of intellectual life. No longer does the hush of midnight betray secret pacts. Instead, it carries the strains of Vivaldi's violin and Bach's organ, sampled in the grand knowledge and compassion soirees Isabel hosts each month. Under the high vaults of the ballroom, canvases by renowned painters hang alongside manuscripts by venerable philosophers, writers and musicians. Doctors and theologians gather at long tables, sharing insights over crystal goblets of spiced mead. The crystal candelabras light up eager faces as conversations leap from medical ethics to the nature of the soul's resilience. Here, science and art partner in a delicate dance, each footfall a testament to the palace's transformation from fortress of politics to haven of humanistic inquiry. At night, after the last guest's carriage has trailed off into the crisp air, Isabel pauses in the empty hall. The echo of laughter lingers, mingling with the faint scent of lavender and oak polish. She runs her fingers over the marble banister, feeling the cool grooves worn smooth by generations of viewers. In this stillness, she senses the pulse of ideas that have taken root, a soft thrum that warms the lonely hours before sleep. It is here, in the hush after the applause, that she tastes the gentle triumph of a vision realized. In their private life, childhood memories mingle with the thrill of ongoing adventure. To mark their 7th anniversary, Isabel and Leopold escaped to the glittering heights of the Alps. They climbed paths dusted with fresh snow, feeling the thin air fill their lungs with crisp clarity. At the summit, they stood hand in hand on a ridge of shimmering white, gazing down at valleys swathed in emerald and gold. The wind, sharp as a whispered vow, tugged gently at Isabel's hair. There, amid the silent grandeur of the mountains, Leopold repeated the words they had spoken beneath different skies. I vow to respect you always, and to share the burden of shaping our legacy. Isabel closed her eyes against the light, lifting her hand to touch his cheek. And I will forever guide our house toward a brighter dawn. She replied, her voice a soft echo among the peaks. When they returned to Brussels, the palace welcomed them with the same warmth that had grown around their work, a living membrane of respect and affection. That spring, to celebrate their eldest son's 5th birthday, they devised a compassionate court festival. The children gathered in the gardens, where tents offered playful medical checkups, gentle pulse readings, laughter-filled lessons on plant-based remedies, and kindly physicians showing them how to bandage scrapes. The young princesses and princes giggled as they practiced auscultating toy dolls, their faces alight with the wonder of discovery. At the head of the festivities, Isabel watched her son, a bright, curious boy, deliver a short presentation on genetic patterns using colourful blocks and placards. He spoke with surprising clarity, his small voice rising above the soft chatter of his peers. The crowd, a mosaic of nobles and townsfolk, erupted into applause that rolled through the square like joyful thunder. Across Europe, newspapers hailed the event as the compassionate court's triumph, heralding Isabel and Leopold as the humanitarian royal duo. Their faces, printed in ink and paper, beamed from shutters and stalls, a reassurance to all that governance could be both authoritative and kind. As evening settled, Isabel lingered by the canal, the clacking of oars sounding like lullabies. Lanterns floated on the water's surface. Lanterns she had arranged to symbolize each new doctor trained under her programs, tiny beacons illuminating the path forward. Leopold stood beside her, his warm hand covering hers. They watched the lanterns drift into the night's gentle current. Carrying the promise of continued progress, Isabel inhaled deeply, the crisp air rich with unseen possibilities. We have come so far, she murmured. Leopold nodded, his breath visible in the cold, and yet our journey endures. The lanterns flickered in the distance, like soft answers glimmering at the edge of sleep. In that tranquil moment, Isabel's eyelids grew heavy. The palace behind them, alive with light and laughter, seemed to rock ever so slightly, as if imagining a lullaby of its own. Hand in hand, they turned toward home, each step a gentle echo upon the stone walk. The scent of night-blooming jasmine trailed them, its fragrance a comforting promise of dawn. And as Isabel closed her weary eyes to the soft rhythm of their footsteps, her heart whispered the quiet refrain of her life's work, that love guided by reason and illuminated by compassion could indeed heal the wounds of the past, forging a legacy of health and humanity for generations yet unborn. 10 years have passed since that winter wedding, and Isabel Maria Oenia and Leopold Charles stand as living proof that power can walk hand in hand with intellect and compassion. The Habsburg lineage, once trapped in a vicious cycle of consanguineous unions, now stretches its branches toward other royal houses, ties forged not by blood alone but by shared devotion to science, education, and the health of all peoples. Each morning in Brussels brings news of new alliances, princes studying botany in Florence, princesses mastering midwifery in Vienna, and royal envoy correspondence, humming with plans for collaborative hospitals. In the palace corridors, portraits of forebears hanging in silent judgment have softened into watchful witnesses. The marble floors, once echoing with the stiff click of ceremonial boots, now know the softer tread of scholars bent over scrolls and physicians carrying clinking satchels of herbs. Isabel often pauses at the grand staircase's landing, sunlight filtering through stained glass and painting her reflection in a mosaic of gentle colours. She sees in that kaleidoscope not the isolated princess she once was, but the queen who has guided her house toward a wider horizon. Today, Madrid's palace holds the ceremony that began it all, the 10-year anniversary celebration. The same walls that once felt cold now seem to glow with warmth. Banners of white and emerald line the galleries, their soft folds rippling like whispered hopes. Isabel ascends the dais, beneath a canopy of golden light, her heart beating in a peaceful rhythm, as if cradled by the palace itself. Beyond the windows, the city stirs to the rhythm of church bells and the first breeze of dawn, nudging curtains that tremble like expectant eyelashes. When she begins to speak, her voice is calm, carrying the measured cadence of one who has weathered storms, both personal and dynastic. "Adeca de algo?" she says, eyes shining with memory. "I was a girl trapped within a body, bent by inherited pain. Today, I stand before you with pride, seeing our house rooted in knowledge and compassion. Each word falls like a soft petal into the hushed chamber. Then applause ripples through the crowd like a gentle tide, washing away any lingering doubt. In that moment, time seems to pause, as though the palace itself pauses to listen. Its marble columns leaning in with veneration. Isabel closes her eyes briefly, picturing the frightened 17-year-old who once trembled before an unyielding throne. Now, she feels the steady warmth of shared triumph, the warmth of mothers whose children live unburdened, of scholars whose libraries hold the promise of healing, and of a lineage reborn in the light of understanding. Beyond the hall's carved doors, morning spills into the palace courtyard, scattering petals from the blossoming orange trees that fence the grounds. The air carries the gentle hum of laughter and the distant drone of foreign languages, Spanish, French, and Italian voices blending into a chorus of solidarity. Flags from allied kingdoms flutter at every turret, their colours intertwined in patterns of unity. Isabel inhales deeply, drawing the fragrance of orange blossom and tile dust into her lungs, as though breathing in the very spirit of renewal. Under the soft gold of dawn, the palace no longer looms as a symbol of power wielded from on high, but glows as a lighthouse of science and humanity. Its towers seem to stretch skyward, not in assertion of dominance, but in aspiration toward greater understanding. Windows catch the sun's rays like mirrors of hope, reflecting back the promise that knowledge, rather than lineage alone, shall guide the generations to come. In the hush that follows her speech, Isabel allows herself to feel the gentle settling of exhaustion and relief. She glances at Leopold standing beside her, his posture relaxed, his eyes bright with shared wonder. They share a private smile, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they've navigated together. Their partnership, once forged in court politics and cautious vows, has matured into a union of minds and hearts, each day deepening their commitment to a cause beyond themselves. Later, as the ceremony dissolves into procession through the sunlit gardens, Isabel drifts along pathways edged with lavender and jasmine. Each inhalation is a benediction. The delicate purple blossoms hum their own lullaby. The white petals of jasmine nod in affirmation. Statues of former rulers line the alleys, their stone faces softened by moss and time, granting quiet approval to the path their descendants now tread. The river Tagus glitters in the distance, a ribbon of silver winding through the city. Isabel lingers at the balustrade overlooking the water, imagining its steady current as an echo of her own life's flow rising from fragile beginnings, gathering strength from tributaries of collaboration, and carrying wisdom onward. The palace behind her hums with the bustle of continued celebration. But here at the edge of the terrace, all is serene as a softened twilight. Isabel places a hand upon the smooth stone railing, feeling the warmth left behind by the sun's departure. It is a simple touch, yet it reminds her of every hand she has clasped in faith clinicians. Cholas, patience, and sovereigns alike. Each clasped hand has been another stitch in the tapestry of shared purpose, a thread woven through 10 years of perseverance. As the first bird song of morning breaks the stillness, Isabel closes her eyes to commit the moment to memory. She recalls the myriad trials, painful therapies, whispered doubts, turbulent counsels, and now, the thriving life of a dynasty awakened to possibility. In that hush, her spirit softens into a restful hope, a lullaby of quiet triumph. When she opens her eyes again, the palace benches and guests are just beginning to stir toward the next festivity. Isabel turns to follow the path back inside, her steps echoing a gentle beat, a heartbeat attuned to a legacy of healing. And as the dawn unfurls fully, casting every turret and spire in rosy gold, she carries with her the soft, enduring conviction that through intellect, tempered by empathy, she and her consort have charted a course that will guide their house, and indeed, the world into a brighter, kinder tomorrow. The story of Isabel Maria Oenia's life and journey is not merely a royal tragedy, but a vivid testament to the power of knowledge, courage, and compassion from a 17-year-old princess forced to endure physical pain and an unjust destiny. Isabel transformed her suffering into the impetus for an entire dynasty's reform. The most important message this video conveys is that when science is combined with humanity, we can break ancient curses, reshape the legacies of the past, and open a brighter future for generations to come. First, the story underscores the importance of daring to question and challenge outdated traditions. Isabel refused to suffer in silence. She studied, learned, and called upon experts to seek solutions alongside her. It was precisely this scientific spirit, unending curiosity, and belief in progress that enabled the Habsburg court to enact revolutionary reforms in marriage, healthcare, and education. Next, the video emphasizes the role of solidarity and collaboration. Isabel and Leopold Charles were not only steadfast individuals, but also embodiments of an alliance between science, government, and religion. They demonstrated that sustainable change requires the support of an entire community, from physicians and scholars to officials and the church. That collective strength can overcome any barrier of power or prejudice. Moreover, the story illustrates the value of compassion in leadership. Isabel used her position to expand medical scholarships, encourage women to enter the healing professions, and establish the Household Health Fund for the common good. She showed that leadership is not just issuing decrees, but also listening, understanding, and caring for each individual. Finally, the video delivers a lesson in hope and perseverance. Despite enduring pain, obstacles, and resistance, Isabel never lost her faith. 10 years later, she and her husband still walk hand in hand along a challenging but deeply meaningful path. It is that faith which ignited the flame of change, not only for their family, but for all of Europe. Through this video, we learn that knowledge and compassion can go hand in hand, that daring to change and embracing science is the path to liberating ourselves from invisible chains, and that true power lies in perseverance, courage, and community unity.